You watch them practice for the end of the world in elementary school. Duck and cover drills where teachers told you to hide under your desk if nuclear war started. As if plywood and metal could protect you from a Soviet missile. You were 7 years old, watching your heroes get murdered on television. JFK in 1963, Malcolm X in 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. in April 1968, Robert Kennedy 2 months later. 4 major assassinations before you hit puberty, and everyone just expected you to keep going to school the next day. If you were born in the 1960s, you didn't just witness history. You absorbed trauma that adults pretended wasn't happening. While your older siblings were protesting Vietnam and joining the counterculture, you were stuck being a child during the most violent decade in American peacetime. You couldn't change anything. You could only watch. And that helplessness? That shaped every single thing about who you became. Let's start with what actually happened in those classrooms. This wasn't theoretical. The Cuban Missile Crisis hit in October 1962. For 13 days, the world stood on the edge of nuclear annihilation. Soviet missiles 90 miles from Florida, American warships blockading Cuba, 2 superpowers playing chicken with humanity's survival. And what did they do with you? They ran drills. Duck and cover exercises where you crawled under your desk and tucked your head between your knees. Some schools made you sprint to the basement to see if everyone would fit. Others had run home from school drills, the logic being that if you could get home within 15 minutes, you could probably die with your mother. That's what one historian documented. The actual messaging to children: get home fast enough, and you can die with your family instead of alone at school. Think about what that does to a developing brain. You're 6, 7, 8 years old. Authority figures, teachers you trust, are calmly explaining how to position your body for nuclear war. They're building fallout shelters and stockpiling crackers and biscuits in school basements. Your parents are digging shelters in backyards. The government is literally preparing for apocalypse while telling you everything's fine. That created a specific kind of anxiety, existential dread before you had language for it. The world could end any second, and there's nothing you can do about it. Adults can't protect you. Desks won't save you. The missiles might already be in the air. Then came November 22nd, 1963. You're in class, maybe 3rd grade, 4th grade. Someone pulls the teacher into the hallway. She comes back crying. President Kennedy has been shot. They send you home early. You spend the weekend watching the funeral on television. The riderless horse. John saluting his father's casket. He's 3 years old. You're not much older. That's when you learned. Anyone can be killed. Even the president. Even someone young and powerful and protected by the Secret Service. Death doesn't care about power or position or how many people love you. Malcolm X gets assassinated in 1965. You're still in elementary school. Martin Luther King Jr. in April 1968. You watch cities burn on the nightly news. Riots, National Guard deployed. Then Robert Kennedy 2 months later in June. Shot in a hotel kitchen in Los Angeles. You watch him die in real time through television coverage. 4 major political figures murdered in 5 years. And you absorbed all of it during the exact developmental stage when your brain is learning whether the world is safe or dangerous. This isn't the same as reading about assassinations in history class. This is watching your country unravel while adults pretend it's normal. While they tell you to focus on schoolwork and stop asking questions that make them uncomfortable. By 1969, you're hitting double digits, old enough to understand what's happening in Vietnam. American troop strength approaching 500,000. Casualties reported every single day on the evening news. Body bags, helicopters. Soldiers your older brother's age coming home in coffins, or not coming home at all. Then December 1st, 1969, the draft lottery. They drew birth dates out of a drum to determine the order of conscription for men born 1944 to 1950. Your older siblings, your neighbors, the teenagers you looked up to, watching to see if their birthday would send them to war. November and December births got the worst of it due to how the lottery clustered. But everyone lived with that fear. The draft wasn't something happening somewhere else. It was happening to people you knew, boys you went to school with, brothers of friends. And you watched them leave for a war nobody could explain. This created something psychologists don't talk about enough: borrowed trauma. You weren't old enough to be drafted, But you were old enough to feel the fear radiating from every teenager you knew, from your parents when they looked at your older brothers, from families gathering around televisions to see if their sons would be called. And then there was the divide you couldn't cross. Summer of Love in 1967, Woodstock in August 1969, 400,000 people gathering in upstate New York for music and peace and psychedelic drugs. Your older siblings or their friends might have gone. But you were 9 years old, 10 at most. You watched the hippie movement from the outside. Long hair, bell-bottoms, protest songs. Make love, not war. Free love and LSD and rejection of everything your parents stood for. It looked like freedom, like revolution, like the answer to all the violence and fear. But you were too young to participate, too young to drop out, too young to join communes or march on Washington or burn your draft card. You were stuck in childhood while the world was changing around you, witnessing transformation you couldn't be part of. That created yearning without resolution. You inherited the idealism of the 60s counterculture, but missed the movement itself. By the time you were old enough to rebel, it was over. The hippies had disbanded. The communes had failed. Vietnam dragged on until 1975, but the protests had lost their power. So what did all of this actually do to you? You became hypervigilant without realizing it, always scanning for danger, always waiting for the next catastrophe. Because catastrophes kept happening. Nuclear standoffs, assassinations, riots, war footage at dinner time. Your nervous system learned early that safety is an illusion. You don't trust institutions because you watch them fail repeatedly. The government that nearly started nuclear war. The Secret Service that couldn't protect presidents. The draft system that sent boys to die in a war nobody could justify. You learned skepticism before cynicism was cool. And you carry this deep belief that you can't change anything. Because you couldn't. You were children during the most consequential decade of the 20th century, and you had zero power to affect any of it. You could only watch, absorb, survive. Now you're in your mid-50s to mid-60s, and that childhood still lives inside you. The anxiety that never fully goes away. The expectation that things will fall apart. The inability to fully relax because some part of you is still that kid hiding under a desk, waiting for missiles that might already be in the air. You raised your own kids differently, tried to protect them from the violence you absorbed, monitored the news they watched, shielded them from fear. But you also gave them something you didn't have, the belief that they could make a difference. Because you learned the hard way that powerlessness is its own kind of trauma, watching the world burn and not being able to do anything about it. So you taught your kids to speak up, to protest, to believe their voices matter, even if you never quite believed yours did. You're not paranoid. You lived through legitimate threats. Nuclear war wasn't hypothetical. Political violence wasn't rare. The draft wasn't abstract. You watched it all unfold during the years when your brain was learning how the world works. And the world you learned? Dangerous, unstable, capable of ending without warning. That's not a character flaw. That's a rational response to childhood in the 1960s. If this uncovered something you've carried in silence, you're not alone. 60s babies absorb traumas nobody named. This channel is for people whose psychology was shaped by history they couldn't control. Subscribe to keep exploring the invisible weights we carry, and drop your birth year below. Let's find each other. Because maybe it's time someone acknowledged what living through the 1960s as a child actually did to us.